for the first maybe section of the movie of the podcast, we should just explain the plot and then we can analyze it because it is kind of a confused plot. It's kind of a confused movie.
It is a confused movie. I usually I've been recently being at the end of the podcast being like, oh, would you recommend this movie?
Yeah.
But maybe well, we're gonna save that to the end. Let the listeners decide, and then at the end, will give us. They'll probably
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you say it at the beginning, yeah, I don't know if people will listen to the podcast.
Yes.
I
Especially
think
if it's especially
think
for a
you're
movie that's less. What?
I think your mic is still low. You're still low,
Okay, give me one.
or
second.
maybe we're just really high in
No,
our
you sound
headphones.
perfectly fine. Hold
We sound fine. Yeah, you're quite hush when we're talking. I can't much hear you.
on. I think it must be my. I have a new computer,
Mm.
and let's see. I don't want to turn my gain like way up to the top. Is that better though?
Go on, say something else. Say some stuff.
Does it sound better now?
It sounds better, and I think you're closer. You're closer on
Yeah.
the mic as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. This is the. I was worried about this because it's a new computer. I haven't probably fine-tuned things as much as I'd like, so hopefully it's okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll work around it.
As long as you can hear me. If you can't hear me, then I guess it's no good.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, just a heads up as well. Like, I know you're already recording, but I'm expecting the door to knock like 15 minutes ago, and it still hasn't. So there might have to be a pause, in which case we'll just pause it for a second.
That's totally fair.
All right?
Yeah,
That's
if you
just
need
a
to like
heads up.
we don't leave. You can just like turn off your mic or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh wait, but we're live right now on YouTube, are we not?
We are.
Oh my
Wow.
god!
Well, yeah.
If I'm forgetting. All right.
So I mean,
You can still take a break. There's
Yeah, of course we
bathrooms
could chill.
Yeah.
right? I think the audience will be forgiving.
and so should we start with just like, what are your initial thoughts on the Pinochet vampire movie, Conde?
Yeah, well, let me introduce you, and then
Okay.
I guess everyone probably knows you from previous such episodes as Children of Men. But
It's
this
a
week
classic.
on Left of the Projector, we are talking about the 2023, so a fresh movie. It's on Netflix or wherever you might get your movies, and it's called El Conde. It is a Chilean movie by Pablo Larraín, and it is a very strange movie. The byline listed on IMDb says, after living 250 years in this world, Augusto Pinochet, who is not dead but an aged vampire, decides to die once and for all. And with me this week, back again on the podcast, I have Bring Out Your Dead. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you very much for having us again.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yeah, this might not be such a great episode because we're kind of confused about this movie.
Excuse me. This is gonna be a great episode.
Speak
I
for
have
yourself.
confidence. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. The choice again, like last time we did Children of Men, purely Griff's choice. And this time it's like, oh, we're going to do it again. We have to do El Conde. And I'm like, I haven't seen that movie. And he's like, you got to watch it. It's brilliant.
I did.
It's the best movie I've ever seen.
That's not what I
He
said.
said he did.
No,
That's what he
but
said?
this movie for us, it is like the perfect intersection of what we are talking about in our podcast. You know, this is Latin American imperialism. Kind of a spoiler, British imperialism plays a pretty big part in it. So for us, this is like the essentials of what we talk about.
Yes, in that regard, it is a perfect movie.
Well, I mean, not every movie has to be a 5-star winner. But one thing that I think we should do is save the major spoiler related to this movie till later, just so if someone were to, I don't know if people actually do this, but if they decided they didn't want to know kind of the reveal at about what, an hour 20 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, like in the
30
fourth
minutes.
act of the movie. There are 4 acts in this.
Yes, it is an interesting movie, and for anyone who was curious, which I was, is this movie is in Spanish. But what's bizarre about it is I turned on the movie and it starts talking in English for a narrator, and no matter what language you put it in, the narration is still in English.
Yeah.
which is very surprising for a movie. And let that be in the back of your mind, as you're watching this and listening, that's
Yeah.
a weird thing.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit tricky. Like we got to work out how we're going to do this, because as Griff was saying, maybe it's best to first of all like just explain the movie, just go through the movie. But I think we'll probably have to stop just at that fourth act beginning.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to stop there, and that's the point where we can say, okay, everybody who wants to watch this movie, jump out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, this is something that someone has told me before that they do. I think they have a book podcast where they'll talk generally about the movie without spoilers for like 2/3 of it, and then they'll say like this is like the major spoiler piece.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it fits for this movie, but I mean, I'll briefly lay it out, but feel free to take over, add additional things. But generally, the movie starts in you're essentially treated to a aging Pinochet living in Chile and sort of I guess you'd say in what's the word? Not
Kind of looks like, sort of like a concentration camp almost.
It does kind of look like a concentration camp. It's very strange. He kind of basically very isolated. He has, kind of his servants that work for him. And then it kind of takes you back to who Pinochet was, how he became who he is. And immediately we discover that he is a vampire who's survived. He witnesses the French Revolution. One of the most bizarre scenes of many bizarre scenes in this movie is witnessing the execution of Marie Antoinette and then licking the guillotine's blood and then carrying off her cold or warm head, I should say.
Yeah.
I think in that scene when he's in France, his name was Claude Pinoche.
Pinoche,
Yeah, Claude Pinoche. And he discovers he's a vampire.
Yeah, he finds out by accident.
Yeah,
almost,
because he wakes up after a massive bender where
Yeah.
like loads of prostitutes tell him like that he bit another prostitute.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they try to hold him down, and a priest comes out of nowhere, and they just do a terrible attempt at like putting a stake through his heart, and he just overpowers all of them.
Yeah.
And then brutally
Yeah. It's
smashes a woman's head.
It's the
with
most-
a mallet.
It's the most graphic scene of the movie, and it's in like the second minute.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, really.
He didn't
is.
waste any time. He's like,
yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but when I made a note during that scene, it's sort of, I think it's like a very good precursor to just the brutal dictatorship that Pinochet led in Chile.
Yeah.
So it
And I
felt
think
like
it,
it was
it kind of established.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, it kind of, I feel like one of the central themes. There are a few central themes here, but it kind of establishes one which I think is interesting, where we often think of the French Revolution as like the origin of revolution, whereas sort of the thesis of this movie is actually the origin of counter-revolution. And it's like here he becomes a counter-revolutionary by viewing the French Revolution.
Yes, it very much so. It kind of gives you the sense of, because he brags consistently throughout the movie about all of the revolutions that he prevented, or he killed a bunch of Reds during the Soviet.
Yeah, well, again, interesting because the ones they pick are all losers. So I think they say that he was a white Russian, he was in Vietnam, and he was in Algeria.
And Haiti.
And Haiti, which are
Haiti.
all ones which were lost by the counter-revolutionaries.
Right.
Yeah,
So
this
it's
is
almost like you weren't even good at it.
Yeah.
We say we were going to go through the movie, but this is something I said to Griff already. It's just like he's a failure.
Yeah.
Like I think that's what this is about. Like, oh God, I can't spoil it.
Yeah.
I'm always going to spoil it.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, we'll get there. But yes, he's a bit of a failure.
Yeah.
In his own eyes as well. He's
And
not happy.
so
with
they
himself.
have him go through, and they eventually have him end up in Chile. I think it's in like the mid-30s, as Hitler's starting to rise in Europe, and he joins the army and becomes Augusto Pinochet. He takes on the persona that's going to be him and rises through the ranks, it seems like. And the thing that's interesting is that they kind of allude to the fact that he was part of the coup of Salvador Allende.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they don't make any mention of the fact that actually it was like the United States and the Western powers that essentially were providing the support for this. It's kind of left out of the story.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because again, like by connecting him to this sort of like older world Europe, they present him as a man with like this sense of honor. This is like a big thing for him throughout the movie, that he has like, he's not an honorable man, but he has an ingrained sense of like I'm supposed to do honorable things, and he can't really countenance the two. And it seems like, I mean, because like again, one of the opening scenes, he's talking to his wife, and one of the things that really upsets him is he said he swore to Allende he wouldn't betray him, and then he says to her, like, you made me betray him, and that's ruined my entire life, or like ruined my reputation.
He's
And
always blaming other people, though.
Yeah,
That's the thing. He's always blaming other people for his things. But as well, we're talking about this opening scene, and we're trying to set the scene. And yeah, it starts in France, and then they do this quick fire history of Chile and the overthrow of Allende. But this is done through the most extreme plot exposition
Yeah.
I've ever seen in my
All
whole
explained in English by the
explained
narrator.
in English
Yeah.
for 15 minutes. You know, it's just telling you exactly what's happening. And it's sort of a strange sensation. It's like you said, it's in English. Like
yeah,
this
in
part.
a British English,
Yeah.
which I think makes it even more. It's almost like the way I almost perceived it is, you know, like the British. You often think of like the British kind of like writing the history of their imperialism the way they want it to be remembered, and this is kind of the way that the narrator wants it to be remembered.
And I mean, to go back to your point of like they don't really bring in the Americans at all. This is sort of like, again, they make Pinochet French originally, like this Marie Antoinette thing. It seems to be like drawing a very clear line of like Pinochet is an extension of European colonialism, not of American colonialism.
Right. No, that's true. That's well, I mean, the way, especially the way you describe it as it being the birth of counter revolutions from a European perspective, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
the whole start of it, it's strange in that way, because I think then once we're finished doing our exposition, then we actually get to the compound, right?
Yeah.
And we actually start, and the movie sort of starts.
Yeah.
Then.
And we have to talk about the fact there is a guillotine in the center of the compound for the entire movie.
Oh yes, hanging.
Not just
there.
a guillotine, a pretty massive one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it changes height.
I think
like, in the scenes. Like sometimes it's like really, really prominent, and sometimes it's not so prominent.
But I think that's more just like because like with the style of this movie, it's very kind of like an early expressionist style. It's really going for like that old school 1920s, 1930s horror,
which it does very, very
which
well.
it does very, very well.
Yeah.
But I
Yes,
think like sort of the changing size of the guillotine is it's more just like that expressionist thing of when it's important, it's there, and when it's not, it's not.
Yeah.
Which I assume is just like a very creative way to angle the camera to make it more prominent. I assume I'm not a, you know, but it looks very like the first time you see it, it's like towering over. It's almost like a skyscraper within this compound.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's set in amongst lots of gravestones, and I constantly was pausing to try and read what it said on the gravestones, and I finally got it. I finally paused it at a moment where I could actually see, and I've got it here on my computer. Let me move the name of the person.
Oh, I couldn't. I didn't. I tried to look, but I couldn't see.
I got one. Gustavo Lee Guzman. Guzman. And apparently he was the leader of the Air Force.
Oh yeah.
That bombed the
palace.
Yeah. So I'm only guessing that the rest of the graves are
all of these references.
Are other names, but that's the only one I can get.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. But since you mentioned the style of the movie, it's in black and white. It has this very gothic kind of feel to it too, is the way I got it, especially the music. The music is very chilling and haunting and comes in at very good moments. I'll talk about a very bizarre musical note soon as we get to the scene later during the dinner, which I find just
Yes, I watched it twice. I watched the movie again today, and I remember that scene, which we will get to, and I was like, wait, what just happened? That makes no sense.
And
there are a lot of times in this movie you feel like what
there's a lot of things that just don't go anywhere.
Yeah. But I do think talking about the score, I think the score is amazing at this. The cinematography is amazing. The sound is just fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think in general it mixes between this sort of brass band marching sort of military style thing to like these very rusty violin string instrumentation.
And there's even some Vivaldi in there as well, right? They use Vivaldi.
Do they?
Yeah, they use the Four Seasons.
I didn't get that.
The guy who's the cinematographer, Edward Lackman, he's been around forever, and he's done a lot of very wide-ranging kind of directors, and so felt like kind of like a culmination of like his career. He's done some like Steven Soderbergh movies. What did he do? He did the movie Selena, Aaron Brockovich, Virgin Suicide. So those are kind of his.
Yeah.
So basically, almost everybody in this movie did a great job.
Yeah. I mean,
almost everybody.
I mean, like technically, we'll talk about the script, but
Yeah.
like technically, it's an incredible movie.
Yeah,
Like,
really, really beautiful.
like
Yeah,
Visually, it's beautiful. The music is really great. The acting is quite good.
yeah,
fantastic. Yeah,
It's-
I think the acting is great. Yeah,
yeah,
but
Okay,
anyway,
so I guess, well, so we've gotten to the
Yeah.
point now where you
Yeah.
said they're now at this compound in Chile. I think they allude to the fact that it's like southern Chile, where it's much colder,
must be
presumably.
Patagonia, I think they say.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that. So in this place, we learn sort of about his kind of his family. So we learn that his wife Lucia and then his longtime butler Fyodor is sort of you mentioned before, I think like a white Russian who
Yeah.
Pinochet,
Sort of
has
carried
had-
around with him.
Yeah, just kind of his what's the word that like his familiar.
Yeah, yeah,
well, he calls him his slave.
He
yeah.
does call him a
know?
slave. Yes.
Yeah.
Which I guess a familiar is kind of a slave to a vampire.
Yeah.
I guess so.
He'll just kill you if you don't do what you say. And it's the kind of the setup for me, as you mentioned, maybe it was too long. The
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
15 minutes was too long.
Yeah, we were kind of having an argument about that before we signed in about like just like the last bit didn't need to be in there.
Yeah. But we can get there. Let's go through.
Okay,
How are we gonna do this, guys?
No.
How are we gonna do this?
We'll get there, but maybe better than the film did. We'll see.
Yeah.
So we see this, and then what we then learn is one of the most interesting visually scenes is you see now, so you believe is Pinochet flying over in his magnificent cape through now. Do they say what city? Or they don't.
It's
really say
Santiago. It's
I assume.
Santiago. Yeah.
Just the most cosmopolitan city, and he's going around with a crook with like basically a sharp knife, and he's cutting the hearts out of people, and he's putting them into a blender,
Yeah.
rocketing it up into a cocktail, and having
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
slurping it
And it's
down.
specifically like both visually and in the narration. Like the narration explicitly says like he's gotten bad at killing. Like he's almost forgotten how to do it.
yes, and there's also very explicit mentions of the kind of blood that's better. Like European blood
Yeah.
versus older blood, or like the proletariat blood. Does he say? I don't know if he says the word.
Yeah, no,
proletariat.
he says plebetarian.
Yeah, something like that.
I forget. Yeah, the narrator at the beginning
Yeah.
says that Pinochet really likes English blood. Obviously,
Yeah.
says the narrator, because it's got a hint of the Roman Empire
Yeah, something like
and
that. Yeah.
Viking skin.
Yeah, something like that.
Whereas
Yeah.
Latin American blood is, I've written it down, Latin American blood is, oh no. This is not very professional. You can edit this.
Well, and one thing we forgot to mention while you're looking that up is
Oh, yeah.
we also forgot that he also fakes his own death. Like
Yes.
he's
Yes.
dying, or he's not dying. He's getting older, and he just doesn't want to be, the
Yeah,
head of.
which I think is interesting because that is kind of how Pinochet stopped being the dictator, right? Like he just decided he didn't want to be dictator anymore.
Yes.
And so there's like that representation there. And then you also get like a nice bit of characterization where there's a sort, not exactly a montage, but a scene of him lying in state. And someone spits on his coffin and says like asesino, like murderer. And he opens his eyes. It's like when someone insults his reputation, he can't ignore it.
Yeah.
And then the next bit you see is 3 people doing a Heil Hitler over his
Yeah.
grave. And it's and so you get like this sort of interesting montage of like what he's left behind, like this fractured society that's come behind him.
I mean, I think that's, to me, from what I read about the director, is kind of what he was going for, is to kind of show the conflicted state of his legacy to Chile, which I think maybe we can get into that later once we've gone through
Done
this
the plot.
bonkers plot. So yeah, so you were saying, so he's become terrible at killing, but
Yeah.
you see he still needs to do it because that keeps him alive. Which is another thing that they don't really explain early on, is that he gets older, but it's, I guess we learn later, it's basically like the less blood you eat, the less
Yeah,
young you
the
stay.
older you get, yeah.
Yeah, the more blood that you have, the younger you
Yeah,
remain.
and again, like it seems as if like, because they say like he wants to die, but like within sort of the own canon of the movie, it seems like he can only pretend to die because he did it once and he just came back.
Right, he can make his heart stop briefly.
Yeah, but then he came back, so it's like it doesn't seem like he actually can die at all.
No, he just kind of tired of living, but he can't really die.
Yeah.
Or he's tired of being. Well, we'll get to that part. But then the thing that I think this is where you kind of, so now that's, I guess you could call that the first act, kind of, and now sort of the main crux of the movie is when we see what are his children. I think there's I don't have all their names written. I guess they don't really matter.
Their names are not important.
No, they're not. But so we have his kids
first it's the nuns. First we see the nuns.
Yes, you're
Yeah.
right.
That's
so you
it.
have the nun scene, and you have them kind of bringing this one particular nun. She's dressing up in kind of a very non-nun outfit, just plain clothes.
And also, it's important. So, like, because they're first at the nunnery, and one of Pinochet's kids is there.
Yes.
And like the Mother Superior says that she has like a special mission for her, and then you don't really get any more information. Then it cuts to.
But she's great. She's great. Like, because they describe her, again in this mountain of exposition that this movie loves to do so much. It's like she is firstly a nun, an exorcist nun that speaks French, that's great with maths.
Yeah.
But above all, she's delicious. That's
quite
her
the
character.
resume.
Yeah.
Right.
It is
So
very
she's
weird.
chosen, right? She is chosen by the Mother Superior to go try and follow this, right? To go to Pinochet, who everybody thinks is dead, Pinochet's compound, in order to pretend to be an accountant.
But to kill Pinochet.
To kill Pinochet.
But then we later find out that she's actually going there to steal Pinochet's money, not
For
to
the
kill
church.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually makes perfect sense, right?
Perfect sense, right?
The church wasn't getting enough donations; they needed to steal
Well,
from.
this is a thing that like, right? I mean, classic things like you see the same thing in Spain under the dictatorship, in a lot of Latin American countries where the Catholic Church is intimately connected to the crimes of military dictatorships. And intimately connected to sort of covering them up once they're finished. So I think it makes a lot of sense that you have like this nun character in there.
That is true.
Yeah,
I guess, of course, it makes sense that there's an exorcist nun that's great at maths.
Yeah,
And her
of course.
acting was superb in this. I have to say.
She's
by
the
way,
best
she
character,
Is
yeah.
amazing.
Just
She
her
is so
facial
good.
expressions alone, like she didn't have to say anything.
we were talking about this I'm not sure if they did do it with makeup, but like she has like a silent movie face, if that makes sense. She has like
Yes.
massive eyes, really angular features, like
Super long neck.
Yeah.
She looks like.
Oddly
Cougar
enough, just
Beast.
last night I watched the movie Sunset Boulevard, which is, I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen that one.
like, it's essentially one of the main characters is like a former silent movie star, and the same facial expressions came out. So when you said that, I'm like, man, I didn't think of it that way, but they had to tell a story with their face. And so
Yeah.
And
you needed a
I
certain-
think, I'm not sure, but I think because they went black and white, I think they were probably able to put like white makeup on
Yeah.
and like lots of eyeliner on these characters to make their features pop more, that we wouldn't be able to see. We're not able to see that for sure, but if it was in color, they probably would have looked weird.
Yeah.
Because these features are really, really popping, especially with her.
I don't think this movie works in color. I mean, I think the way they
Nah.
did it is perfect for what they were going for.
It has to be high gothic. It has to be like that weird high gothic sort of expressionist thing. Like, because otherwise it just, it doesn't make sense as in the real world. It doesn't function.
So here is where we now get to, like I said, sort of the main plot. You now kind of gave the backstory as to where Carmen, who's the nun, is basically being brought in to get the money for all of the, church or the family, whoever thinks both people are essentially vying for the money that's been hidden.
Yeah.
Because as a dictator, Pinochet had, offshore accounts and hidden money and all these things. And the next, 30 or 40 minutes of interviews or kind of interspliced with other parts of this is probably one of the best and funniest parts of this movie.
It is a really funny section. Yeah.
Best part by far.
And it is interesting because just before you get to the interviews with his kids, like they all sit down to, I don't know if it's dinner or breakfast or lunch or whatever, but they all sit down to lunch, and you get to see like the sycophants, like the family sycophants, all trying to sort of like butter him up and try and find out where he's hidden all this money. They don't know where it is. And then you get the very clear from him that he fucking hates his kids. Like he hates his entire family. And I think like another kind of theme that runs through the movie that you see here is he's talking about why he wants to die. And he says, it's like, everyone out there hates me. They all hate me. And they're like, no, they don't hate you. And then he responds like, they should hate me. And you see this weird like dichotomy with like, he actually kind of respects the people who hate him in a way. Like,
Do you think that in some way I guess we can discuss it in a bit now, is the way that they portray Pinochet, the way he sees himself. See, during some of those interviews, he portrays himself essentially as a victim.
He's quite pathetic in the interviews, right? Because he comes last. So you go through all of his sort of like idiot kids, and like his kids are all sort of imbeciles in different ways, and she's sort of like it's weird because she's openly mocking them. Like when you watch the film, she's openly mocking them, and they're just not picking that up. And they're just talking about how smart they are. Like how like I think one of the guys says like, I bought a steel company from the military and then I sold it back to them for like $10 million extra or whatever, and I didn't change anything. It's how smart I am. And so they have like all these like just like sort of imbecilic interviews, and then you get to Pinochet, who has sort of been characterized as being above this, but he just instantly falls for her flattery. He's like just as imbecilic as the kids in a lot of ways.
But this is the thing I actually like the most, as you were saying, Evan. This part of the movie is my favorite part. These little portraits that they have, and she takes photos of them as well, which sort of lends into that like the portrait part of it. But they sort of drop that in the movie as well, so that sort of frustrated me as much as it charmed me.
Yeah, they just showed a book later. I think that was really all it was.
Yeah, something like that. But the thing is, what she does is she's a mimic.
Yeah.
Every single one of the kids, like they have different personalities, although they're all equally as terrible. But like some of them would be crying and talking about how terrible like their misfortune is, and then she would be weeping along with them. Yeah. And then other ones would be braggadocious, and she would be following them and mimicking that behavior. Or even the stupidest ones, the most imbecilic ones, she starts acting imbecilic and start insulting them directly to their face, and they can't even see that. And then when she finally gets to Pinochet, Pinochet starts falling in love with her. So what does she do? She just mimics. That's all she is. She's just a mimic the whole time to these characters.
But she also does the classic flattery, right? Because we've seen through these opening scenes, Pinochet's thing in this movie is they can call me a murderer, but they can't call me a thief, right? That breaks my honor. And so she starts talking about she's like, so you took all this money. He's like, but I'm not a thief. She's like, no, of course not. Of course you're not a thief. Yeah. He just like plays into that flattery, and he immediately falls for it. He's like just as imbecilic as the kids.
But again, she's a mimic because he goes, oh, I'm not a thief. And she's like, no, you're not a thief.
Do you think that his like butler or servant or whatever, do you think he seems like the type who throughout the century or however long half century they've known each other would have been the type to flatter him, but it seems like he doesn't anymore, and so he doesn't get any of this. Like as a dictator, when he was in rule, he had people that would just pump him up. Like this was kind of the way he felt, and he no longer had anyone to give him any kind of attention. And Carmen comes in and is giving him the attention.
But there's also an interesting thing which again sort of runs through the whole movie of like one of the reasons Fyodor doesn't flatter him is because Fyodor literally doesn't care about the money. He has no interest in money. His only motivation is like just killing people. It's just being violent. He specifically says to Pinochet, like, I liked the killing, you liked the money. And it's like this thing that like Fyodor, because he doesn't care about the money, sees him for exactly what he is and is not willing to play up to that. Like, no, you just are a thief. You know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, he was a torturer, I think, is what he says he was.
Yeah,
right?
He relished in it.
I think they say he was the head of the DINA. They don't say DINA, but like the Chilean secret police, they imply that he was the head of the secret police.
And he apparently, like this has come very more specific, but they mentioned like how they got people to kind of do what he wanted. And he said something like, I made them enjoy killing, which is what he seemed to do. He enjoyed killing people to eat their blood.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. We can get onto it later. We can go back to the actual plot, which we just keep on trying to avoid. But that's the thing. She mimics everybody's behavior, but she cannot mimic his.
Yeah.
Because his is like...
I mean, Fyodor, right?
Yeah, Fyodor.
Yeah.
You know, that's the one character that breaks her facade. She cannot mimic this evil.
And you pointed out, so like when she talks to Fyodor, so when she's talking to the kids, when she's talking to Pinochet, it's 180 degree shots. They're completely separate. No one is ever in the same shot. But when she talks to Fyodor, he actually breaks that wall and enters her shot.
Enters her frame.
And is like sniffing at her neck. And he is the one person who actually scares her.
Yeah, she's visibly upset.
Yeah.
Well, and even at the dinner party, which we can discuss more later, but in part of the dinner party is they always have not just one person in the shot, but they always put them right in the center of the frame too, where it almost feels like they're talking to you as the viewer, which I really, again, the cinematography is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll get to it. But again, that lends to this sort of hollow sense by the end of it.
Yeah.
It's just
Too
like
much.
it's like you had the most beautiful trash meal ever. It's not a trash movie at all. It's not fast food.
I
movie.
do like this movie. I do. I should say.
I know. I do too. I do too. It's just like it. We'll get there. All right.
Yeah.
All right,
No,
so
no spoilers. In fact, I also like the movie. Okay.
So
Please, Evan, take control.
So the next portion. So this is kind of, I guess, now that was Act 2, I guess you could say, and then sort of Act 3 is now Carmen is essentially revealing, or it is revealed that she is a nun, and that she's trying to exorcise Pinochet, but he becomes he's infatuated with her, and they end up sleeping together, and he transforms her into a vampire.
Yeah, and it seems like at some point she becomes infatuated with him, right? Because it's not like he sort of pins her down when he bites her neck. She leans in and allows him to do it. She's on top of him, I think.
Yeah.
So there is a point where she decides she wants to transform into a vampire.
It's almost like this is how she could then get what she wants, but then maybe her plan to actually be the most accomplished accountant nun ever to exist. She realizes that she could keep the money for herself, and then just
God knows her like what she's up to, because she does say prior to this, I think she was talking to one of the children in one of these interviews, and she said she wants to be close to the devil, basically paraphrasing. She wants to know the devil in order to humiliate him.
Yeah.
Right. So you're sort of thinking she's been sent by the nunnery to do some accounting and some exercising, but she's got her own mission.
And again, there is because there's a couple times they cut back to her talking to the head of the nunnery, and that there is a scene where she's talking to her and she says like, and if you are tainted by this evil, you will still be forgiven. So there's almost like she gets permission to become a vampire in a weird way, but again, doesn't really connect to the story.
That doesn't. It doesn't really matter. It just kind of.
Yeah.
It just was cool to turn a vampire. Vampire. I mean, if you think about it, it is kind of cool. And so this is now the point in the movie. I think it's fair for us to drop the big spoiler word.
Yeah.
And then
So Evan, tell us, why has the narration been in British the whole time?
the narration has been British this entire time because dun dun dun, it is Margaret Thatcher, who also is a vampire. Which
honestly,
that
gave me the biggest chill of the entire movie, just seeing Margaret Thatcher.
I mean, that's like the biggest reveal of like the most truthful thing that you could possibly bring about.
Yeah.
Tell me this, Evan. Tell me, right? Was this a surprise? Was this a twist for you?
Once I realized that it was. Do you need to? Oh.
I think Chris, you tell me, Evan.
Okay. Well, I'll fill in Chris. I mean, as soon as I heard the British voice throughout, I'm thinking like, who could this be? I didn't peg it being. So the other spoiler is that it's also his mother.
Yeah.
So Margaret Thatcher is Pinochet's mother, or not originally Pinochet. I don't know that I thought it was Margaret Thatcher.
That's.
But I had a feeling it was someone like a British aristocracy of some kind.
It's interesting because Margaret Thatcher, like, there's that whole thing of like received English, right, which is like the posh British English, which is not a natural accent. But Margaret Thatcher's cadence is extremely unique. The way she speaks, like the way she does that, like she really sort of extends out the end of a sentence. Like, I'm not sure if I can do a Margaret Thatcher impression, but you know,
we can I can intersplice a brief quote from Margaret.
Yeah, but you know, she's like, I am the Iron Lady. Like she sort of speaks like that, and it is such a unique cadence that like the second I heard it, like Margaret Thatcher.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
actually, what it did sound like to me, it sounded to me. I looked at the cast. I didn't look at the cast because I wasn't thinking. You know, I didn't know there was going to be like a spoiler of it being Margaret Thatcher. But initially, to me, it almost sounded like Gillian Anderson doing an impression of Margaret Thatcher.
Who did it in the movie? Yeah, she did do that in the movie, right?
Yes, I don't remember which movie it is.
I think. Oh, was it Meryl Streep who was in the Iron Lady? I can't. No, she was in The Crown. That's
The
right.
Crown, yes, The Crown.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
so-
I think.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Well, so I was saying is that I didn't know it was Margaret Thatcher. I thought it might have been like a British aristocracy of some kind.
Yeah, it would be like, I mean, the equivalent, like for us hearing that, it would be the equivalent if you heard someone doing a Donald Trump impression. Like, that's Donald Trump. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you would just hear it. You would just like,
Yeah.
No, because I don't know if you mentioned this, but yeah, like Griff put it on. I watched it with him. He had already seen it, and then immediately, no, I think she said the line. She was talking about the nun, and she describes the nun as delicious and good at maths and an exorcist in that over-the-top British upper-class accent, and then she says, "And this woman is not for turning," and I'm like, "That's Thatcher."
yeah.
And this will go into my feelings about the movie in general. But it's like, was this supposed to be a big reveal? Because you made it too obvious.
Yeah.
For me, anyway, I was like, that's Thatcher immediately.
I think I'd be interested to know if other American audiences tag it as quickly versus maybe me just haven't heard Thatcher as much to catch that accent that she has. It's very distinct.
Yeah, I think it's that line that this woman is not for turning. But like going into it as well, this is what annoyed me so much. Like I think I liked the beginning of the movie, not the very beginning with the exposition, but like this part of the movie is where it sort of lost me a bit because she says as well, this woman is not for turning about the nun,
Which we should also explain. That's a classic Margaret Thatcher quote.
That's a classic Margaret Thatcher quote.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
So she said that about herself, right?
Yeah, she said that she would not. She was trying to basically be pushed out of power, and she said, "I am not for turning."
Yeah.
So at that moment you're meant to.
That's how I knew.
Okay.
But she mentions that about the nun, but then it turns out the nun is for turning because the nun gets turned.
Yeah.
So why did you say that line in that
also,
way?
But also in the way it's structured, she does get turned, but then she sort of not gets turned. And then she goes back to being turned, and then she gets not turned again.
But then in a piece that I found actually better than the early exposition is she then narrates her own backstory, which I thought was kind of interesting and short. It was only 2-3 minutes or 2 minutes where she basically says that she had been raped by a Strigoi, which is a vampire, presumably from Austria-Hungary or wherever, Transylvania. And, and so she becomes a vampire. She is then with a soldier, I think, a soldier.
Yeah, sailor.
Yes. Well, she kills the vampire, right? So she kills the vampire that impregnated her with Pinoche.
Oh, spoilers.
Well, we already got that.
I said that a minute ago.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
So she kills that vampire, and then she abandons Pinoche at an orphanage, and then she's like, and then I went back to England and became the Iron Lady.
But why is she saying? But why is she saying this? She's talking to Pinochet, right? So the exposition of telling Pinochet, "I'm actually your mother," right?
But
that's huge news. But then when she tells Pinochet, and then I married somebody in England, and then I became prime minister, and they called me Pinochet knows this.
Yeah.
Why are you telling Pinochet this?
Because me and Chris kind of, when I said at the start of this episode, when we were talking about it, we started arguing a lot. This was what I was saying. I think especially if you're like in your 20s in the USA, you wouldn't know who Margaret Thatcher is.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense that she's telling Pinochet, who does know this story. Like, she's not talking to the clouds.
Well, this is I'm going to pose a theory.
Okay, go for it.
To go deeper into the end of this movie, I'm going to spoil. We've already spoiled the piece. I mean, I guess. Well, I'm going to say anyway. So at the very final part that that I think is kind of just flat at the end of this movie
Yeah.
is we learn that they decide that Thatcher and Pinochet are going to continue to drink blood. They're going to get younger again, and they're going to become
I-
youthful. And
There-
Pinochet is now a child. Is it possible that in their like going backwards, they lose their memory of what happened, and so she's telling him as a boy?
Oh my
Ooh,
God.
yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
Ooh.
I have a whole thing on the little boy, which I'll bring up in a second.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things we miss, right, is when the nun turns into a vampire, Pinochet then tries to turn her into Marie Antoinette. He like
Right.
makes her put on the dress. He gives her Marie Antoinette's head, and that's when she sort of, I guess, rebels against him and is, like pulls out her thing and is like, "I'm gonna kill you," and he pulls out a sword and she like flies away, and then Theodore guillotines her. She dies the same way Marie Antoinette dies, but she's guillotined facing up, like looking at the guillotine. And I don't know, like there seems to be like this idea of like she sort of gave in. She gave in to like the fascism. She became a fascist, and it's almost like as someone who started as an anti-fascist who then gave in, she saw it coming, and so that's why she has to watch the guillotine drop on her own neck. I don't know. This
Let me explain it. Let me explain that part of the movie in a more contrived way for you. Okay, so Thatcher flies in, right, doing a monologue because that's all Thatcher knows how to do, right? And Thatcher's like really angry at Pinochet for turning the accountant non-exorcist,
Which-
right? But no, wait. But she's really annoyed for some reason, and so she's like, I have to go now to sort this thing out. So she arrives and she tells Pinochet to kill the nun. And Pinochet says no, and then Margaret Thatcher goes, all right then. And then the next scene, the nun is dressed up as Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
And then Pinochet takes out Marie Antoinette's head and gives it to the nun, and the nun's like, oh, that's cool.
And she throws it on the floor,
Yeah,
right?
because she remembers that she actually isn't bad.
Yeah.
She's now good again.
Yeah.
And she takes out a knife and then she tries to kill Pinochet.
And he
pulls out a sword because she
Yeah.
wasn't expecting that. And then she flies out through the roof,
Yeah.
right?
And then they have like that weird. It's like honestly like one of the most beautiful scenes of the movie.
Oh, no, yeah, that was before that.
When
but
she
when
kind
she
of
gets
learning
turned,
to fly and she's
That's,
flying.
Yeah, yeah.
that's an amazing scene.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We're bitching about it hard, but that scene where she gets turned, even the moment where she like takes her first breath out,
Yeah.
and it's really cold where they're at, and like just this fog coming out of her mouth, and she's got these eyes like she's just took some drugs.
She's like in ecstasy,
She's
right?
in ecstasy, and
Yeah.
then she just stumbles out the door and starts floating and flying around. And the thing I notice about the musical score as well is normally the strings, they're all like they're stumbling on top of each other in this cacophony. They're normally like rusty and clumsy, but in this scene, the strings are not rusty
Yeah,
at
yeah.
all. They're more pristine and
That's the
clear.
Vivaldi scene. They use Vivaldi.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
I did
Well,
not know what
that
it
whole
was.
thing. One of the things generally is that the narrative that you normally think of, like what vampires, like the lore of vampires, is kind of just completely wiped away. Other than the fact that like they need blood, like they
Yeah.
can go out in the light, all these things. But when it comes to Carmen sort of becoming a vampire, that's very common in like vampire movies where they kind of have like an enlightenment moment, and it almost felt like she saw God and like
Yeah.
again somehow as a nun who supposedly should have already seen God because she's a nun.
I got a question for you, Evan. How does one kill a vampire?
Take off its head.
That's not one of them.
That is. Yeah, you
It's
take off its
not.
head.
It's not. That's the Highlander. You're thinking about Highlander, which is awesome. And
Presumably it's a
Can we do Highlander on this podcast?
Ooh, I haven't
love
seen that in
Highlander.
a long time.
Oh my God, Highlander. That would be great.
Well, stake through the heart.
Stake through
usually
the
is
heart.
one.
And
Silver
you take
bullet.
off its head. Stake in the heart and head off.
Okay, Evan, is chopping off a vampire's head a way to kill a
In
vampire?
some vampire movies, like I think, or some vampire, like the show. It's the Guillermo del Toro show he had on TV on like on FX.
I
a few
haven't
years
watched that one.
It starts well and then kind of falls off. But in that, one of the things, like one of the characters has like a samurai sword, basically. He's chopping off heads.
So
Yeah.
you can kill a vampire in lots of ways. This whole
Yeah.
thing that you can't kill a vampire, you
But-
can kill him in loads of ways.
But either way, that
Or
is
sunlight.
like because
Not in this movie.
we kind of have to wrap up the fourth section because it gets really confusing really quickly.
What,
Like,
it's not already confusing?
Well, like, because so she becomes a vampire, When Margaret Thatcher arrives, then and Margaret Thatcher is Pinochet's mother, and then she convinces Pinochet to wait. No, so then Fyodor, his butler,
Yeah.
who is having an affair with Pinochet's wife,
Which we haven't even met Pinochet.
Yeah.
Mentioned Pinochet's wife.
she convinces Pinochet to kill his wife, and then Fyodor, in sort of a rage, guillotines the nun.
Yeah.
And-
Which means Margaret Thatcher coming all the way over from a cave in England somewhere made no sense because
Yeah.
her whole mission was like, I'm going to.
No, she cut. Wait.
Okay, sorry.
So then the butler guillotines the nun, and then Pinochet drags Fyodor, his butler, into a barn and saws his head off.
Yeah.
And then all of the kids leave,
Yeah.
and Pinochet and Margaret Thatcher leave.
Yeah. But they literally just say, whatever, bitch.
But and then
You know, they're just
and
like,
then-
whatever. And they walk
and
out.
then a group of nuns comes to purify his weird like concentration camp house.
Yeah.
Well, but
And then Pinochet and Margaret Thatcher. Pinochet is like a kid, and Margaret Thatcher is taking him to school,
Yeah.
and that's the end of the movie.
well, doesn't Margaret Thatcher kill Pinochet's wife?
No, she convinces him to do it, right?
Oh,
Pinochet
the
does
knife to
kill
the
his wife.
back.
Yeah.
This is another thing I just said to Griff before we started. Something that annoyed me a lot. We haven't even mentioned the wife, but basically the wife, like as a character, she's just constantly like forlorn and sad because Pinochet won't turn her into a vampire.
Yeah,
Right,
she
so
really wants to kill people.
And she really wants to kill people. That's what she really wants to do.
yeah.
And so she just mopes around the whole movie, right? And then finally, Fyodor, the butler, turns her into a vampire.
Yeah.
Right? And so now she's a vampire, right?
Yeah.
So, what's she gonna do? Fucking nothing. She's just gonna mope around the place like normal. She's not gonna do nothing. And then 3 minutes after she gets turned, she just gets killed.
Yeah.
It's just like I was saying this to Griff. This would be so much better if they were sort of having a standoff where you got Thatcher. This is the craziest scene ever. You got Thatcher, Pinochet, and an exorcist nun all standing, looking at each other. Like demanding action.
Yeah.
And then in comes the wife. And if the wife came in with like blood dripping down her face,
Young.
young,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and one of her kids behind her dead.
Yeah.
She's a vampire now. She is a badass. And she just has killed the kid, and then there's some sort of fight. But no, she just mopes into the scene, "Meh," and then she gets stabbed in the heart.
I also love how all the kids come out with like crappy
Weapons.
weapons that they're going to
Yeah,
try to
yeah.
kill their dad.
Yeah. That was the
Yeah.
thing Chris was saying. Like, it would have been good if we'd seen them try and do like the world's worst coup,
Yeah.
but they just don't go anywhere.
Yeah,
They just
yeah,
said-
yeah. And it sort of makes sense, as Griff was saying, because I was saying it'd be fun with the coup, and Griff was saying, no, it sort of makes sense that they're just so feckless and they're so rudderless. They have nobody's telling them what to do, and their only ambition and their only thing they're looking for is money. So they're sort of pathetic.
Yeah.
But I think once again, it would have been funnier if they did try and do a coup.
Yeah.
And the final thing I'll say on this is that one thing I said to Griff as well before we started is like, this movie would have been 10 times better if Margaret Thatcher was not in it.
No, I think she had to be in it.
No exposition at the beginning, right?
I agree with you on
And
that.
then we focus on the characters, because the character of the nun, of Pinochet, not the wife, but the kids, was amazing. Those were our great characters.
I think Margaret Thatcher. I think she does add something to it. We'll get into the analysis
wow
section.
factor.
I think we've wrapped up the plot. And to anyone who's listening, if that was confusing, it's less confusing than the film.
Yeah. Griff made me watch it twice, and it was more confusing the second time.
But that is the plot section done, right?
Yeah, I mean, they don't. And the funniest thing about my notes is I'm like taking a bunch of notes. I've got like a page and a half, and then I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then I wrote down when they start the action movie, I'm like, oh, here's the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it very much is. I think they could have cut to the beginning part to like 3 to 5 minutes.
Well, I think the beginning part would have worked if it was exactly the same visuals with no narration, where you kind of get thrown in cold and you're just like, what's happening?
Seeing all the action, see the
Yeah.
actors talking more.
Yeah.
perhaps.
Like, not even the actors talking about it. I think like the exact same visuals, but just with no narration explaining what's happening. And then you find out it's Pinochet. I think that would have had a much bigger impact. But
Yeah, like
So-
again, the whole Thatcher thing, like it does have that sort of sort of wow factor. It's like, oh my god, especially if we didn't see it coming. I saw it coming. Griff saw it coming, and Evan, did you see it coming? You saw it coming?
Which the
The
Thatcher?
Thatcher. That it was Thatcher.
I didn't exactly see that it was Thatcher.
Wouldn't it have been better if like we didn't hear her at all, and then they were having a fight outside, and then Thatcher just falls out of the sky like a comet, and it's just like dust everywhere, and it was like, what's going on? And then out emerges Thatcher, you know.
I
Like,
mean,
that would have been way better.
yeah.
I don't know what she would have done then. I don't know. I just
Implemented, laws that made things crappier.
Yeah, we'll get into the political analysis. I am desperate to get into the analysis of this movie.
So here's a question that I'll pose to you, and then you can also give some of your other thoughts. Is what do we make, I guess, of how they portray Pinochet, and what you think the goal was in creating such a ridiculous satire of Pinochet as a vampire, just completely ridiculous, making it seem like he's an idiot. Like he didn't act, like at some point they mention like that his wife kind of had some of the ideas too, early on. And so what do you make of, because was a terrible person, and his government did terrible things. Like, is that obvious?
I think there is a degree, like, I think it's made obvious. Like, one of the first things you see in the movie is people with black hoods on lined up in front of a trench being executed. You see there are multiple references to, again, one of the best scenes in the movie when he's just talking to Fyodor, and Fyodor has that line where he's like, I liked the killing, you like the money, and he's like, no, I also like the killing. And they talk about like Fyodor's like, the torture was an act of love. It was like I was doing it with love. And so I think the brutality really does like come through. But I think it's important, like when we talk about how he's represented in the movie, to talk about Larraín himself, the director.
Yes.
Because Larraín is a legitimate auteur. Like he has like 11 movies in total, I think. And what really made him famous were the 3 movies he made about the Pinochet dictatorship, which was Tony Monero.
Which is amazing. Tony Monero is amazing.
Amazing,
I love that movie.
Post-Mortem and No, which are basically sort of like middle, beginning, and end of the dictatorship. And also farces. They're presented as farcical. And so I was kind of watching a few interviews with Larraín about this movie specifically. And one of the things he said that was interesting is he presented Pinochet in farce because when you do a farce, you don't have to garner any empathy for the character. Like you don't have to, like he doesn't have to make you feel empathy for Pinochet, and he did not want you to feel empathy for Pinochet. So he chose to make it a farce, to make him this kind of ridiculous character.
Yeah. No, I think that is successful, right? The way that the farce and the satire works.
Yeah.
But then, what were you were saying something before we got into the political aspect of it. Now I'm blanking what you were going to say. Oh, shit. I forgot. Well, what do you think about the?
See, I have a thought here on like, how is he portrayed? And I was also watching things the director was saying, and it's very, he was saying it's like the first time that Pinochet is being depicted. I can't be sure about that, but
I think it is. It's the first time he's been put on movie.
Yeah, so it's sort of like tricky for him. It's like a tightrope. It's like a tightrope he has to walk, like depicting this man. And as I was saying to Griff, it's like the entire nation is his co-producer, or at least he felt that way, because he's like, oh, how do I? It's not satisfy everybody, but it's not piss off everybody as well at the same time.
Well, also, it's like, how do you break the seal on Pinochet, right? It's like, if he's never been portrayed before, how do you break that seal of portraying him? Like, what direction do you go in?
I think he portrays himself, like Pinochet says in the movie a lot. He's just like, it wasn't my fault. Somebody else told me to do it, or blah, blah, blah.
And I want to say as well, historically, that is exactly what Pinochet said.
Yeah, but that might be what he said, but like that's obviously not what he did. He wasn't just like this agent of like this external effects made him act that way. But I think in the movie, like he is also sort of rudderless as well. He's sort of like, it's just like whichever way the wind is blowing, he goes. And in that way, it sort of doesn't pin him at all to any sort of action or any sort of responsibility. And I know that's how he might have seen himself, but I'm sure that's not how Chile saw
But
it.
I think the portrayal of him in this movie as like living in distant Patagonia in this weird sort of gothic lair, but frequently going into the center of Santiago, and you see him like flying through the high rises and stuff. He is presented as like this specter haunting Chile, like this specter that is still around, that is still inflicting violence, that is still killing people, and like this sort of farcical surrealism. I think I sort of alluded to it before. Like the end of Pinochet was extremely surreal in its own way. They're like Pinochet, after being dictator for, was it 10 years in total? I can't remember how long exactly he was dictator for, but he just decided, I don't want to be dictator anymore, and left. And then the military government gave the entire nation a vote to say, yes, I want dictatorship, or no, I want democracy. And they voted for democracy, and that's how it ended, which is an extremely surreal way to end a dictatorship, right?
Would you like more of this?
Yeah,
Like,
actually more
oh,
like
no, thank
50, I think it was like 15, 16 years.
15, 16 years.
Yeah,
Sorry,
But
yeah,
I mean,
mixed
that
up.
doesn't. That's for nickeling and diming here. But
Yeah.
I think this came up a little bit in an episode we did about Pan's Labyrinth, just because it kind of has a similar vibe, albeit Spain. And I think the way I wonder it is because it's was the audience? It's obviously a Netflix movie, but maybe this is a question too: is who is the audience for a movie like this? Is it meant to evoke something to people living in Chile or Latin America?
That's really interesting, because me and Griff were talking about this. This is where we were feuding just before we started, because I kept on pointing out some of the issues I had with the movie, and Griff kept saying, yeah, well, it represents this and represents that, and I'm like, yeah, I get that. And then I was saying, like, this whole exposition with Margaret Thatcher, especially explaining everything, like, for me, I just didn't like that, especially her explaining, then I became prime minister.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And I was like, and Griff's like, yeah, but some people maybe in the US aren't as familiar with this. And I said, yeah, that's fair enough. But then who is this movie for?
Well, I think it's
both.
It's
Yeah.
both, but it can't be both.
But
It can't be like sly and surreal and winky and noddy and
But
like,
I mean,
and at the same time, like explaining everything.
we also have to bring up the fact that this movie its official release date was the 50th anniversary of the coup. It was it was explicitly released on that day, and so whether Larraín, and I was mostly, when I was reading reviews of this, mostly reading them in Spanish, trying to find like if people were actually angry or upset about this movie and this portrayal. I really couldn't find anything, and it kind of goes back to like, in a lot of ways, no one's really talking about this movie at all. There's not very much out there, but I think like we have to remember this movie coming out, and so when it would have begun production, this was right at the end of a period of massive civil unrest in Chile. We had like 3, even 5 years of violent conflict between student movements and unions against the police, with one of the main demands eventually becoming, we need to end the Pinochet-era constitution, because the Pinochet-era constitution had certain things enshrined in it, such as it was unconstitutional for the state to provide health care. That's in their constitution under Pinochet. And so this became a demand, and it eventually led to the election of, what's his name? Is it Belchor? I can't remember the name of the Chilean president now. It's slipping my mind. But who came out of the student movement. They elected one of the protest leaders to become president, and he changed the constitution. So again, this idea of Pinochet as this specter haunting modern Chile, as this movie comes out, that literally has just happened.
Yeah,
like,
but
in real life.
But again, like, is the movie like as a package, like, who is it for? Again, is it for those people who have knowledge of it, or is it for people who don't have knowledge for it? I think it gets I think a lot of the movie fails because it doesn't know who its audience is.
Yeah.
I think he wrote this movie for a Chilean or Latin American audience, but to get Netflix to put money behind this and to probably put it out, they had to change the movie. I couldn't find anything to prove this.
Yeah.
But this is
if there's an editor's cut, like, or a director's cut, like, where like Thatcher's not in it, like telling you constantly how to feel, I would like it 10 times better.
I mean, to me, that is specifically meant for an American, British,
and
Western audience.
I think, and again, like, to go back to the Latin American context, like, Chile has just been through this sort of unrest period. One of the things that really stood out to me is, in the final scene that we mentioned, Pinochet as a kid. And so I don't know when they wrapped on filming the movie, I didn't check, but Pinochet as a kid looks a lot like Milei.
I said this. This is me.
Yeah.
I said this.
He looks a lot like the current president-elect of Argentina with his hair.
Yeah, it doesn't really. It doesn't match up like with the time because like when is this?
Yeah.
You know, I guess it's in the now or maybe the 2000s. It could be or
And-
something like that. But yeah, like Pinochet becomes a child again because he drank
A lot of blood.
vampire hearts.
Yeah. But again,
and
like
he became a super bidet.
yeah,
And,
also
then he comes down a slide and it's all in color then.
it's in color. Yeah.
And he's got this massive mop of hair, you know, the classic dictator haircut nowadays. And I'm like, is that
But
Milei?
He looks specifically like Milei.
Yeah.
And again, like the clear point of that final scene, even without it being explicit Milei, is that like the cycle is now repeating, right? We're returning.
Yeah.
And we can look at that like sort of in the recent period of Latin American politics, right? There is the new pink tide. But at the same time, of the last 5-ish, maybe even 10 years, we've seen this year the left-wing candidate for presidency in Ecuador was assassinated before the election. In Peru last year, a social democrat won, and then the Supreme Court suspended the constitution and arrested him. In Bolivia, we had the coup, and now we're seeing Milei, this like anarcho-capitalist meme, becoming president of Argentina.
Yeah.
So like there is, I think, like if you look at sort of the context of what has been happening in Latin America for the last sort of, say the last decade, maybe a little bit less, there is a clear reference to this cycle is repeating itself. This cycle is returning, right? Like,
Yeah, that is interesting. So I couldn't find when they officially stopped shooting, but they started shooting at around mid-June of 2022. So this is sort of as the end, sort of the tail end of some of those protests and unrest that you were talking about. So it's almost, but presumably he had written the script before and he knew what he was going to do and knew what he was. His
Oh yeah, no.
vision
If
was.
it was supposed to be Milei, it's just like flukily prophetic, you know.
just
But,
somehow,
like,
yeah.
But there is some there, you know, like that kid is supposed to be.
Yeah, and
I don't
and
know,
again, I mean, like
somebody.
I think like the point of that final scene, right, is because I mean, again, Margaret Thatcher, the narrator who just makes sure that you know everything that's happening. She specifically says like he chose to stay in Latin America, and she drops him off, and like the building says like La Escuela or whatever, and so it's like again, yeah, like Pinochet as the child is now like re-beginning his cycle or like returning, like.
Would
Yeah,
you say
I like
that's
that.
almost like the cycle of Latin America and then kind of falling prey to these right-wing?
Yeah. And
So,
as I
yeah.
said, you know, like in the
Prophetic.
last sort of 5-6 years, there've been a lot of examples of, like, there is the pink tide, but there is also a lot of pushback against the pink tide happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think as well Thatcher, like, I think this going back into the movie a bit away from the politics, but it's like Thatcher, like, bears Pinochet.
Yeah.
She creates him.
Yeah.
So it's like this sort of lineage of evil.
Uh-huh.
But if we go back to the person who who turned her into a vampire, it's just some lad,
Yeah.
and I think it was just some sailor,
Uh-huh.
and for me that was a bit like he kept and in the movie as well. I was telling Griff this. Thatcher said he kept on saying his name was Sigloy.
Strigoi.
Strigoi, which I think is the
Strigoi.
German word for vampire.
Yeah, no, I think it's like Romanian or something.
Romanian, yes.
Maybe. But like, so I'm pausing it and I'm trying to look for details. You know, I'm like, oh, what's that name? What's that name? And I Google it, and then it turns out it's just like Romanian version of Nosferatu, and I'm like, that's just not interesting.
But I mean, you could also link that whole thing, like this deep passion Margaret Thatcher has for her child, compared to the fact that Pinochet fucking hates his kids. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like this sort of eliteness that they kind of hold themselves within. It's like, they're like the elite of the elite. You know what I mean? Like, and I think you mentioned when we were watching it before, you see in the movie that Pinochet does not like Latin American blood, but Margaret Thatcher does. She likes the taste of it.
She likes the taste.
Yeah. And so you can see like this idea of these sort of like, it's not about being elite in Latin America. It's like, it's about being a colonial elite, right? There's like this clear distinction between them. And
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And so, like, yeah, like this idea of like the colonial elite versus like the local elite, right? Where the local elite are useful in the sense that they keep laundering money, they go through the motions, they'll be like maintaining the system, but you hold them in disdain because you're the colonial overlord.
Yeah, well, I think that plays a lot into, before I'll say the other thing I was thinking of, is that plays very much into, I think what you're saying, Chris, is the lineage of these people would have been so much better if the Strigoi had been like, I don't know, like Attila the Hun or something crazy. I don't
Yeah,
know.
right. Just
Yeah.
something like that.
You know, someone ruthless, and then it would almost be like the root of evil is through all these things. But maybe it's better this way, if only because it's not to say that evil begets evil like this lineage, but it's actually the result of individual people who take advantage of, the system in some way. I don't know.
I think we're doing the script a favor by interpreting it that way.
Yeah.
I think like I started when I was watching this the second time. I'm ready to take notes, and I'm starting noticing lots of things. But I slowly stopped doing that because the movie stopped paying attention to its own narrative. And like another thing that I noticed is that scene, which is the best scene in the movie, which is where the nun gets turned, and she has this euphoric moment, right? And she starts flying around, and it's very like she's enthralled with this sort of like passion of evilness of the devil. But then we see Thatcher getting turned in the movie as well, and she's just sad afterwards. And then we see the wife get turned as well, and she's just mopey, as I said. It's sort of like there's a sort of inconsistency to it that I think like stopped me from following the narrative. And I think if there was a lineage of evil, I don't know, the story would have flowed a bit better.
Well, yeah, the most consistent criticism I saw of the movie was that Lorraine was too in love with his own idea.
And I think that's the best way to look at it as well.
He had a great concept that was filmed beautifully, acted beautifully. It just wasn't the narrative just doesn't get there.
Well, again, like if you think about earlier on, me just trying to sum up the conclusion of the film and not being able to do it. I mean, it's like
It was a bunch of people kill each other and the rich stay in power.
But it is fun to talk about, to be honest, because it's all these scenes when I don't know how well this sounds to listeners. I have no idea, but I think this sounds better than the movie does. Because the movie is, I don't know, it is beautiful, and as you said, Evan, like I love the concept, and I saw the director Lorraine saying as well. He's like, it's pretty obvious to go for the vampire.
Yeah.
Like he exists and he thrives off of the blood and the lifeblood of the people.
Yeah.
And in order for him to sustain himself, he has to take and kill. It's just like, okay, we've got a perfect analog here.
Yeah.
And so it's a great starting point. Add on top of that the amazing visuals, the great music, and the wonderful acting, and we're almost there. We're so almost there. And it just it annoys me that it just didn't stick.
Yeah, but the other thing that interests me is like when we were messaging on Instagram, Evan, you were saying to me, it's like, it seems like no one's watched it, which based on like the fact that it's a pretty prominent Latin American director, it's been pretty heavily promoted by Netflix. Like I remember seeing posters for it, seeing advertisements for it, and just no one watched it. Which seems strange to me. Like, like at least like to not even watch it a bit and then be like, I turned it off because it was so bad. Like no one's watched it at all. Like,
yeah, I found a few YouTube videos of non-political like YouTube channels that just, because it was Netflix, they probably were like, oh, I'll watch this crazy movie. And most of them were giving what I would say is not an analysis of the actual politics or anything, just simply like the cinematography and like, is it creepy? Is it? And that was kind of it. There is no real thing. But the other thing I was going to mention, I don't know what to make of this, but I was looking. So he wrote the movie Lorraine with a writing partner, Guillermo Calderon. And looking at his profile, just on Wikipedia even, it seemed like he was a playwright and didn't make any other movies that I can see except for Naruto, I think he worked with him on.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that changes how it came out.
But there are elements to this, and it's something that Griff pointed out to me. It's just like there are details in this. The scenes are so rich, like the bed on the ground that you were saying.
Yeah, that's
like,
how vampires have to sleep on
have to
Earth.
sleep on the earth. So like the
I was wondering that
floorboards,
too,
floorboards
why the
are all
whole-
ripped up around around the bed.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, that's awesome when you pointed that out. And then I noticed in the sitting room with all the chairs, the floorboards are also ripped up. And I was thinking to myself, oh yeah, maybe if Pinochet wants a nap,
Yeah.
you know, he has to be there. But then in his office, he's got a really comfy chaise lounge, and that's not on the earth. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah,
come
I think-
on, stick with it, guys.
I think
You know?
even like in that group chat we were in, Evan, like maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, you said this, like, has anyone watched El Conde? I was like, yeah, I watched it. And you said, how is it? I was like, confused. I think was what I said. It's like
It is confused, but it could have been better.
yeah.
And so maybe this is the question now. Is now that we've talked about it,
Okay.
would you recommend this to someone to watch?
I would. And I know that like we've kind of gone through all the reasons that it's like confusing, it doesn't make sense. But I do think it is a really good representation of sort of the legacy left behind by these like military dictators in Latin America. And you know, we've got to remember, people often see like Pinochet as sort of this unique figure. But at the time, you know, there was dictatorship in Argentina, Brazil. Klaus Barbie was in Bolivia while Pinochet was president of Chile. You know, like there were dictatorships all around. And so I think as sort of confused and sort of incomplete as it is, I think it is a great, if you're not Latin American, a great representation of the specter of the dictator, the specter of the military government. I think it is a great representation of that.
Chris?
Oh no, you're on to me. I agree with Griff as far as I think it's strangely essential viewing. Strangely, right?
I think you have, even if you hate it, you have to watch it.
Yeah, like just for the visuals, and I think we're so harsh on it because we want it to be great.
Yeah.
and it does seem like if there was just some. Normally, director's cuts are longer, but if there was a director's cut that was like 90 minutes long, there's enough stuff in this.
Yeah, if you just tweaked it.
Yeah, like there's so many funny details. Like there's one moment that we didn't even talk about where basically Pinochet gets horny. Right?
Yeah, and he falls over.
He gets horny and he's just like, you know what? I'm going to go to that nun's cabin. And he hobbles along in his little walking frame.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go. And and she hears him and she opens the door and she goes, are you going to come in? And he goes, claro que sí. Like, obviously.
Yeah.
And then he throws away his walking frame and it falls
down,
to show his prowess. Takes his first step in his Nikes and falls back on his ass.
Yeah.
And he's just staring up at the sky. And he's like, he realized how pathetic he is. And that's the moment where he's like, I have to start drinking blood again because I want to fuck this nun.
Also,
and like, these scenes are amazing.
Or the sex scene is something in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
like,
Very creepy.
Yeah.
like, but yeah, I think it's definitely worth watching. I think if you don't know that much about Latin America, I think it's a really good intro into like the way Latin America is now and the way Latin America sees its history.
Yeah, and to answer the question, would I recommend it? Look, we watch a lot of crap, right? And there's a lot of hours in the day. All right, this is something that you definitely should watch.
It is,
and then because also I'd be interested because, like, I don't know if any Chileans will be watching this. They might be just outraged by everything we say.
That's the thing. I was trying to
Like,
find.
everybody's gonna. I think a lot of people will take different things from this movie, and I think there's enough in it to appreciate and respect. And I want people to enjoy this movie, so I do recommend people giving it a go, just because there are many hours in the day.
Yeah, just think of it as 4 episodes of The Office.
So, I mean, to come to myself, is I would say you're right on, Chris. I think it's like it's mandatory viewing just to see what they did with this movie. And tell me if you think this. Do you think this movie felt a little like Oscar baity? Not that this would get nominated, I don't think, but it felt almost like we're trying to make a beautiful movie, like of what a beautiful movie should look like. I don't mean that as an insult.
I absolutely agree until that moment, and I think you said it, Evan, until the Netflix moment came along, you know, where it's just like, and I think, again, I keep on going on about the Thatcher moments, and I think that those are the Netflix moments for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, like just some of the like the portraits, like and the interviews and the nun character alone, she deserves some sort of award for what she's done, and so does the cinematography,
Well, I think
and
also
the set design,
it also-
everything. So yes, I do think that they had awards in mind for this.
we're speaking to that. Didn't it premiered at the Venice Film Festival, right?
Mhm.
That was its premiere.
Yeah.
And it got some awards for it, didn't it?
I think probably.
Yeah.
It did. I think it won let's see, the best screenplay at the Venice Film Awards.
Oh,
That's
my
the
God,
worst
that's
part of
the
the movie.
worst part of the movie.
It did not get the Golden Lion, which I assume is probably Best Picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, Best Picture. So it got the award that it shouldn't have won.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's some other things too, like that we didn't mention. Some of the amazing cinematography is the like in the barn. They go down this like elevator shaft to
Yeah.
this creepy
Yeah.
look. It's the set design is also fantastic.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah, and again, it's like so much of it was incredible, and then the story just made no sense.
Yeah, and the dialogue as well, like between them, especially keep on going on about these portraits especially with the children, and like how the nun, like as I was saying, mimics them and their little interactions. They're these little quick vignettes.
Yeah.
They're just spectacular. And this is what I was saying.
They're
To Greg,
very
this
funny.
this annoyed me so much. This annoyed me so much because I was enjoying the movie at that point, and then something happened in the heads of the characters, which they didn't let the audience know, where they just decided to move to the next act of the movie.
Yeah.
But there was no end to that
Yeah.
act. It's like the nun just was like, "Oh, I'm going to do an exorcism now.
Or even
I'm not an accountant anymore."
Or even
It's
the-
like, what the fuck?
Or even the character of Theodore. Like Theodore was an incredibly acted and
Yeah, he was
just an
great.
incredible character.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he's like he has his sort of moments of gold, but then they do nothing really with. He
And
just
he's
just
misused.
unceremoniously kill him.
Yeah, he
They just-
basically gets killed off
Yeah.
camera, like.
Yeah.
I see. I would have liked. I mean, I think that the choice to have him be, beheaded, like with a saw, was like
Yeah.
fitting for him being like a person who was a torturer. It like made sense.
Mhm.
But it would have been better if they kept him alive and he would have been forced to be like their slave
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, it would be more
Or-
humiliating.
Or even if there was just a scene where, because like Pinochet like kills him for betraying him, but just like those two actors already had an incredible dynamic the whole movie. Just a scene of him like trying to apologize, or you know what I mean, like sort
Grovel.
of prostrating himself. Yeah,
Yeah, because
it's just it's just like now he's beheaded. You know, what I mean?
because they do belittle him a lot. They
Yeah.
do. Like one of the children said, he doesn't drink blood. He eats feces and licks sheepdog
Buttholes.
anuses.
Sheepdog.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
And then also when he said, Pinochet says, "When I turned you into a vampire, you dropped your pants. Why was that?"
yeah,
And then one of the other kids said, "Oh yeah, he only has one testicle."
yeah,
Like Hitler.
Like Hitler.
Yeah.
They're trying to demean him constantly. So yeah, like if they just had this moment where like him and Pinochet have this like battle, this verbal battle,
yeah,
where like he's being insulted, like he's always being insulted, but he fights back or something.
yeah.
Or maybe even better, he doesn't fight back. He just
Just accepts it. yeah.
accepts it, and he just becomes the servant and the slave that he's always been.
Yeah,
Way better. Instead, they just chop his head off camera.
yeah,
Yeah, you
Why?
just hear like a scream and then that's it.
yeah,
Especially given earlier they have the brutal beating of the woman's face, and then they
Yeah.
don't use a visual to show the meeting, the murder of Fyodor. It's kind of
They could have just done a really like a rusty saw. Like he takes a rusty saw off the wall,
Yeah.
and then he just like starts sawing through his neck, like and showing that.
Yeah.
It would have been gross,
'Cause
but
again,
like
like,
it would
yeah.
have been in character with the movie.
And also, because again, that bit where Theodore and Pinochet are talking about like who enjoyed what, like that's one of the best parts of the movie.
Yeah,
Like them just like discussing like why each of their motivations was for having the dictatorship. This is the best part of the movie, and then they just never return to them alone. There's never another scene of them alone.
yeah, and yeah. I was gonna say also that Pinochet is like, "Oh, I wasn't a thief. He has no problem with that, but he has a problem with being a murderer, or something." Like that.
No, the other way around.
Yeah,
right?
the other way around. So it should show him murdering
Yeah.
with relish.
Yeah.
But he actually kills Theodore, and he does it grumpy and sort of sleepy. He's
Yeah.
like,
I like the scene when he eventually starts flying around and is like really bad and killing, and he goes into the palace and he's looking for like the bust.
I
of his-
pretends to be
Oh,
Allende.
yeah.
Yes, I
That
forgot
was
about
one
that
of the
scene.
funniest, one of the
Yeah.
funniest scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
And the Thatcher narrator says something funny like,
yeah,
"There is no justice or life's not fair, something funny.
Yeah. That's actually I remember like that was a good Thatcher moment.
Yeah.
Because it's like they still haven't put up a bust of Pinochet's head in the palace.
Yeah.
Like they're so pathetic, you know.
Yeah.
And it's so unjust, and he just stands there like in line with the other busts, looking left and right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that, because it is a dark comedy as well. We haven't even mentioned that.
It is
Like,
funny.
it's funny.
It is a funny movie. Yeah.
There is a lot of comedy, especially the interviews, like the sons. One of my other favorite scenes that just is like encapsulating is when the children are leaving and they go on the boat and they have like the massive boat behind them with all of the stuff on it.
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
pillage his entire.
Like stripping the copper and stuff. Yeah.
But again, it speaks to the fact that they're just idiots. Like they don't even know what to take. They don't even know what is of value. They take like the chairs and the frames and the doorknobs and stuff like that, and then they have a whole boat weighed down with just the sitting room furniture because they're like, we don't know what to take.
Yeah.
You know? And they call it the Ark as well. They make a point of that. That boat is called the Ark. It's Arca. And
Yeah.
it's written there on the side at the very beginning of the movie and at the very end.
I
of
don't
the
know what
movie.
to make of that. I don't
Again,
know.
yeah.
And also like the nuns arriving at the end. Like, what does that mean?
It's funny.
Yeah.
I'll
It
tell
is
you that.
funny,
Like,
yeah.
there's just like this motorboat of white nuns just flies by the camera.
Yeah.
I did like that.
Yeah, yeah. I would say to anyone out there, see this movie and tell us what you think.
Yeah. Like I remember the first time I watched it with my girlfriend. And it's just because we'd heard about it, so we didn't really know anything. And it was me and her. We watched it, and it finished, and we both kind of just went and sat down at the table, and like, what did you think? 'Cause I don't know, me neither. And then just that was the end of our conversation.
And then he told me to watch it, and now we're doing a podcast.
Well, but here's the thing.
You're trying
though,
to
is what I
exercise
say.
your doubt by bringing all of us into it.
There was a book I read recently, and I was on a separate podcast discussing it, where it's a book that I didn't really like, but I kept talking about it and thinking about it. So even if the movie wasn't great, we're talking about it, and
it
you're
will stick
thinking
with
about
me.
it.
It will
Oh,
stick
it
with
is-
me.
It is something that's like a brainworm now, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's in there.
And again, it does strike me that like with such a sort of premise, like Pinochet as a vampire. So like as complicated as the film is, the premise is
Oh, yeah.
simple.
It's great.
And I can't believe people just haven't watched it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, Evan, can I ask you a question?
Oh, please.
Can we do Highlander next?
Highlander. Oh, I'm gonna have to watch it. I don't think I've seen that in 20 years.
20 years.
15
Have you
years,
seen
I don't know,
Highlander,
something.
Griff?
I think I watched it when I was like 10.
Yeah, that's like the Scottish vampire movie.
They're not vampires though, right? No.
When they're not vampires, they're
And-
Highlanders.
And they make the inexplicable reason to make Sean Connery not Scottish in the movie about Scotland.
Yeah, and the other guy, Christopher Lambert, who's French, they make him, like, they sort of switch it. The French character is Scottish and the Scottish character is French, and neither of them can do the other person's accent.
Yeah.
It's the best movie ever. Get us in. Get us in, Evan. Make it happen.
I muted myself because my dog was scratching. But yeah, it's who is it? Trying to think who else is in it.
Sean Connery and that guy.
Christopher Lambert.
Clancy Brown. I think he's one
Clancy
of the guys.
Brown? I have no idea.
It's been a long
But I remember
time
there was
since
a
I've
there was a
seen it.
TV show about it as well.
There
On in the
was.
90s, and I loved that. You know,
They've
back
made
when
a bunch of
very-
sequels of the movie too, as far as I know. I don't think I saw any
Yeah.
of them.
I remember just one moment. I know this is probably not going to make it into this episode, but I remember there was.
I'm going to go to the toilet because I've been holding it in.
All right, go for it. I remember there's a scene. There's a scene in the Highlander movie where there's like an epic fight in an old Scottish castle, and one of the Highlanders has his sword and hits the side of the castle, and it explodes and falls down. And for me, as a kid, I was like, "This is the greatest movie ever. This is just the best." So
I feel like it's a very underrated one. It's I mean, on this podcast, generally, I'd say the majority of the movies I've done are 80s and 90s movies, and that movie is what, like probably 87, something like that.
definitely 80s.
Just
Yeah.
perfect, just the clothing, everything about it. Yeah, we can definitely do Highlander.
Well,
Since
maybe,
you've
yeah,
been screwed out of both picks, haven't you?
Well, yes, I have been. It's definitely my turn.
You get to make
you know what?
him
Highlander is a Christmas movie, right? For me, anyway. Right?
Interesting.
For me, any when I say Christmas movie, it doesn't have to be about Christmas.
okay.
It's a movie that I would have watched when I was younger. And I think on VHS when I was younger, I had Highlander, Pretty Woman, Power Rangers movie, and Casper the Friendly Ghost. So and Ghost.
Oh,
Yeah. So all of those movies is a mad bag. Would just be on rotation, for Christmas. So I'm gonna watch Highlander this Christmas, and then I will let you know if it was a good idea to say, should we do this?
yeah, and certainly you can feel free to choose others. But I love, I love like campy '80s action movies. They're just
If we're gonna go classic VHS as a kid in the late '90s, Man in the Iron Mask.
Man in the Iron Mask. Who was in that?
Leonardo
It was
DiCaprio.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Gabriel Byrne.
Gabriel
Byrne.
Yeah.
What's he called? The French guy. What's his name?
Napoleon.
No, god damn, I forgot his name. Gerard Depardieu.
Oh, okay, that
Yeah.
guy's brilliant. Yeah. What was yours? What were your VHSs when you were a kid?
So I had, let's see, we actually did have Pretty Woman, although I don't think I watched them that
Right?
much. I had a bunch of I had a younger sister, so we had a bunch of Disney, Disney movies. I definitely had, let's see, I had Ferris Bueller's Day Off was one of my favorites.
Oh, that's a very good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that one on this show. Well, I don't know, probably a year ago. That was one of the ones I watched a lot. Let's see, I'm trying to think of other. Was the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie
Oh, okay.
from 1990-ish, I guess.
The live action one.
Yeah,
the
when they're in
live action one.
costumes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good one. I'm trying to think of other VHS ones I had.
You know which one I watched a lot? Balto.
What the hell is Balto?
You know what Balto is, right, Evan?
Isn't it the dog? No.
The dog who saves the town in Alaska, and he's half wolf, half dog, and he has to accept that he's half wolf.
Is
think
this
I
live
had,
action?
Speaking of
Is it
dog,
live
I think I
action?
had Fievel Goes West or one of the.
Oh my
Fievel.
God,
that's a
Fievel Goes West
banger.
is so
That's a
good.
good one. Yeah, that's
Fievel Goes West is amazing.
But I don't think. Is that
Just
the
the whole
sequel
movie.
or no? Is it?
It is.
It is the
But it's
sequel,
because
yeah.
there's no cats. There's no cats in America.
That's five. That's five.
That's Fievel.
No, that's the journey to America.
Yeah.
But
What's
like-
that
American
called?
Tale.
American there you go. Yeah.
Tale
And then
is
the
it,
other
that's
one I
it.
remember I had All Dogs Go to Heaven. Go to Heaven.
Yeah.
Classic.
Another
Danny
one, yeah.
DeVito.
Classic.
But
Oh,
yeah.
and you know what? The worst one I had, I just watched it so many times as a kid. I shouldn't have watched it so many times as a kid. Was the Full Monty?
That's a good movie. That holds up.
Yeah, but I was like 9, and it was the only
I also
VHS I
had
had
that-
for like a whole summer.
I had that.
I
in
watched that movie like constantly.
I had it in VHS as well because my mom was like, "Oh, it's a little bit sexy," and so I had it on VHS. And like, honestly, I showed it to Debbie and my girlfriend like a year ago.
Yeah.
Holds up.
It does.
It holds up.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Wow, that's surprised actually.
Yeah, that's a massive surprise.
There were some other like 80s or like late 80s early 90s sports movies that I like too, like
Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings, Major League.
Oh my
was
God!
another favorite one.
I bet you that movie has aged like milk.
No, yeah, that's not gonna be a
Oh,
good
it's
one.
not
No,
gonna have
very,
aged well
very
at all.
racist, I suspect. now.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think.
Extremely so.
Yeah, but I think I explained that movie to my girlfriend once, only like a few weeks ago, and like I could see it in her eyes. She's like,
But
"What
it
are
is
you
based on a
talking about?"
true story, right?
It is a
That
tr-
was my defense too.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
That's-
It didn't make it any better.
That is always like when you're really struggling with the film, like that's what you bring out. Like it's based on a true story.
yeah.
Loosely based on a true story that didn't have John Candy in it. As
Oh
like a
my
weird,
God! What
creepy
about
dude.
Mighty Ducks?
Oh,
I've
love
never
Mighty
watched
Ducks,
it.
Yeah.
You've never seen Mighty Ducks?
No.
I remember all 3 of them were good. There was 3,
The
right?
the second one is when they go to Europe or something. They play Iceland.
Yeah.
But they don't. I thought they played the Russians. They don't go to Europe the first time.
Well,
Don't they play Russians or something?
I guess
Maybe
so.
that's in the third one.
Yeah, maybe something.
They
like
did
that.
like a
They
Rocky
made a
thing.
TV show. Did you know that they brought back
No.
Emilio Estevez to be like the coach of like the next generation?
Oh my God! I bet you he's aged like milk as well. That
He
doesn't
actually
matter.
looked all right.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for
surprisingly.
him.
Emilio
I
Estevez.
remember when I was a kid, we were all like, "Oh, who do you look like? Which celebrity do you look like?" And I remember it was me and my friend James. This is really random, and James said, "Oh, I look like Tom Cruise," and I said, "Okay, cool."
You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, we were like 8, and I was like, "Okay, who do I look like?" And he goes, "Emilio Estevez," and I'm like, "That sucks."
Also, you're not allowed to just say I look like. That's like saying like my nickname is Dragon. You know what I mean? Like you're not allowed to just say I look like Tom
All right,
Cruise.
chill, dragon. Chill,
Right.
dragon.
So,
All right,
so
all
here's
right.
another question that I asked the last couple ones.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't even come out yet, but I've been thinking about this. So, are there any movies that you would recommend that you've seen recently that you would tell people to go watch?
Oh.
I did watch Napoleon.
Oh,
And-
have you seen it?
Yeah, I did watch it, and it's not a good movie, but it is like 3 hours of entertainment.
Yeah.
It's really entertaining. It's like you'll come out and be like, that was crap, but like I really enjoyed it. It's like
A movie I just watched was actually Tony Manero, which is the movie from the same
which I told you to watch.
yeah,
Yeah,
same director as El Conde, and it's basically a guy in Chile during the
dictatorship.
the beginning the early days of the dictatorship,
Yeah.
and he just really wants to be the guy from Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah, I think I described it to you when I was telling you about it as disco funny games.
Disco funny, it's like disco
Yeah.
funny games. Yeah, it's really good.
Have
So
you
I would
se-
say,
have
yeah,
you
Tony
seen,
Manero.
The Creator?
I haven't, no.
I would recommend that one. It was in the theaters not long ago. I don't think it's out now. It's very anti-imperialist, but most people who have reviewed and watched it have gotten the opposite perspective. Like it's
Okay.
like because they just don't know how to watch. They don't have media literacy to understand that it's actually.
Here's one. Have you guys seen the Florida Project?
Is that the one where they live in the motel?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you seen it?
I don't.
they
think I've
live in the
seen it.
motel, right?
Yeah.
yeah, I have. Yeah,
That was just that's one of the best movies I've ever
it's
seen.
pretty good. Yeah, it is pretty good.
Like at the end of that movie, I was like, I knew it. I was like, I'm gonna cry hard. Like I'm going to make noises.
Yeah.
It's like it's an amazing movie, The
And
Florida Project.
One of the ones I'm pretty late to the party on this one, but I only watched Roma about 2 months ago, and it's like
So good, right?
it's way
I
better
haven't
than the
seen
hype. It's better than the hype. It's
Yeah,
better than the hype
yeah,
it has. Like
yeah.
it really is. It's really good.
That's why I was gonna say for this episode, let's do Roma, and you said no, let's do El Conde.
I haven't seen Roma, and everyone who's like, you have to go see it. You have to see
Yeah.
it. And
What
it's
you
not like
do.
I don't want to.
Go for
I don't know.
It's one of those because it's also the way it's presented. Like I remember I watched it, and at the end I was like, I did not expect it to be that type of movie. I didn't think it was going to be like that. And it's way like all of the hype that got built up around it. It's better than the hype.
Yeah.
Well, which is rare. Usually you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it didn't live up to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a movie not to see. Do not see
Oh,
The
okay.
Killer.
Oh my God, that's so bad.
Which one is the killer?
It's so
Michael
one is that?
Fassbender, the new.
Michael Fass-
Oh yeah.
It is
I think I saw the.
shite.
I
oh
think
my
I saw.
God, so shy.
I think I saw the trailer and I was just like, no.
No, my girlfriend was like, oh yeah, let's watch this. It's got Michael Fassbender in it. And I was like, I got bad feeling about this. And the first 5 minutes, I think we watched into like 30, 40 minutes in just because we were amazed by how bad it was.
Yeah.
He only speaks in like parables or in like, not parables, in like expressions, like solely.
Yeah.
And oh my God, it's so
There's
bad.
no
It's like the
dialogue actually
there's
in
no-
it. It's mostly
No.
narration.
yeah,
It's boring as fuck.
It's so bad.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Speaking of, I had an idea for your project of doing sort of historically relevant films.
Oh, please.
Would you be open to The Wind That Shakes the Barley?
Oh my God.
I haven't
Yes.
Do you know what it's about?
seen it. No, I don't actually.
So is it from like 2000, like 2000ish,
2004.
2000ish? It is a movie that is entirely about the Irish War of Independence and the Irish Civil War.
It's mostly about the Civil War.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so if we did that one, we did that, we'd also have to include Steve from Intervention Podcast because he's
Yeah.
working diligently on a series on Irish history.
Is
Yeah.
he?
He hasn't started it yet. I mean,
Okay. He's got to reach out.
But there's so much. He's
Yeah.
like reading book after book, and he's like, "How am I ever going to do this in less than like 100 episodes?"
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, definitely get him involved.
But
Yeah,
it'd be
The Wind That
interesting
Shakes the
because he's,
Barley.
yeah, it has
got-
Cillian Murphy in it, right?
Yeah, Cillian Murphy.
Killian.
Killian. Cillian.
Yeah.
Killian.
Yeah. Not everybody does. Don't worry. It's
Yeah, it's
Killian.
Cillian Murphy, and he's the only big actor really. Oh, there's like a British actor who's like
Liam
one of the
Cunningham,
lords.
I
Yeah.
just looked it up.
Liam.
I know.
Liam Cunningham.
Liam.
Yeah. But yeah, if you watch it and you're into it, maybe that could be a historically
no,
relevant film.
That would be a great one. It's an amazing movie. The Wind That Shakes the Barley. Yeah.
I just put it down. But yeah, I mean, there's a million movies, and there's Highlander too. You know, those are
As I
complete
said-
opposite movies, right?
Yeah. And they're both Celtic in a way. in a very stretched out way. You know?
Oh, but
All right.
yeah, I have nothing left. We've gone off on other movies because El Conde has. And it doesn't
do
say
anything.
not to say anything bad about it. I think we've just said all there is to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
See it.
Yeah.
See what you think.
Yeah.
come back and say, were we all crazy? Did you love
Yeah.
it? Did you hate it? I don't know.
Yeah, watch
Yeah.
it and tell us, your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
you can follow me or the podcast on Letterboxd. I think I rated it 3 stars. Like it's not
Yeah.
a bad movie, but it's nothing
Mhm.
like mind blowing. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
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 Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is it.
but
Lots of mm-hms.
and I guess for your podcast, Bring Out Your Dead. I know you're working on season 2.
Yeah.
Any nuggets you want to share?
Yeah, we've sort of like overextended our delay just through working out technical issues.
Mm-hmm.
But we have microphones getting delivered tomorrow.
Yes.
So we are going to start recording season 2 tomorrow. We're going to be talking a lot more about sort of like the context of the Spanish in Latin America. And we're going to be talking about the first guy who ever declared Mexican independence in season 2.
Yep.
So yeah, we got a lot of stuff going. We're going to talk about, a lot of stories. We got a lot.
A lot coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
hopefully in the next.
You
But
gotta
hopefully-
let people re-listen or listen to the first season. And
Yeah, this is the
Wet their
first
whistle.
season.
yeah.
And hopefully by the time this one comes out, we'll be releasing season 2.
Season 2, hopefully. Yes, we're expecting season 2 in about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
yeah, this
say.
one I anticipate probably give or take about that. You know,
Oh, okay. Well then,
Yeah.
it'll be out tomorrow, right? Our new season's out
it's like
tomorrow.
the episodes I'm done in like Christmas movies. I'm like, oh, you look outside and it's snowing, and it's meanwhile it's not
Yeah.
snowing. It's,
But yeah, my final comment on our season 2. I have been reading Latin American sort of historical essays and books nonstop for about 2 months,
Uh-huh.
And we
He
gotta-
is intolerable.
and we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. We got a lot of good stuff coming.
Yeah.
yeah, so we look forward to that. You can follow you guys on all the podcast channels and Instagram, and
Yep.
give that show a listen. It's quite entertaining and brought me a bunch of things I knew nothing about. I even took a Latin American history class in college, and
Yeah.
this was like way more informative than any of that could have ever been.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah,
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for having us, Evan.
Thank you
of
for having
course,
us.
of course, and we
All
will catch you on a future episode of not vampires probably. We'll do
That's
some
our thing
historical
now.
fiction. We'll do some historical.
I thought your brain was broken there. It's just like, oh, we'll see you on another episode of Vampire on the Projector.
Oh, that would have been a good one. I have done a few vampire movies, but maybe we'll take a break on those.
Yeah, probably best.
All right. Well, speak to you.